What's up, everybody? Most Knicks fans seem to be very excited about the hiring of Tom Thibodeau. For the first time in a long time, the Knicks hired a coach with a strong track record of winning. In my last video on Thibs, I broke down why Thibodeau was a great hire for the Knicks. Not only did he have success with both the Timberwolves and the Chicago Bulls, but Thibs actually has a very strong record of player development, which doesn't get talked about nearly enough. If you want to watch that video, I'll leave a link in the description. But in today's video, we're going to talk about what a Tom Thibodeau coached Knicks team would actually look like. This analysis is going to be based on Thibodeau's history with his past teams and the recent conversations he's had with the media, including the virtual press conference that happened a few days ago. But before we continue, I'd appreciate it if you guys would drop a like on the video and subscribe. I love making content like this for you guys, and supporting the channel by subscribing really helps me to produce more dope videos. Now let's continue. There's many positive attributes that a Thibodeau-led team will have, but here's the main three things that I think Thibodeau will bring to the Knicks. This may be a surprise to many people, but I think Thibodeau will bring about a modern offense. His offense with the Bulls looked a lot different than offense in 2020, but based on what Thibs stated, I think he will evolve. I think Thibodeau and the Knicks coaching staff will focus on developing the Knicks young players, especially Mitchell Robinson and RJ Barrett. And I think for the first time in a long time, he'll have the Knicks playing good defense. First, we're going to talk about the impact Thibodeau will have on the Knicks offense. Thibs is known as a defensive-minded coach, but I think his offense is very underrated. In Thibodeau's 8 years as a head coach, 3 of his teams finished in the top 10 in offensive efficiency. Just 2 years ago, the Timberwolves were 4th in offensive efficiency. The Thibs-led Bulls were known as defensive teams, but they got it done on both ends of the floor. In 2012, the Bulls were 5th in offensive efficiency, and in 2014, they ranked 10th. The reason they often fizzled out in the playoffs had more to do with injuries, particularly Derrick Rose. If you look at those Thibs-led Bulls teams, they played the game on offense a lot different than how teams do now. They didn't shoot many three-pointers as they only ranked 19th in three-point attempts a game despite being a top 5 offense. And their lineups always had 2 non-shooting big men. The Bulls usually started Carlos Boozer and Joakim Noah, neither of which are stretch bigs. Carlos Boozer can actually knock it down from mid-range, but the offense is much more spaced when you have a stretch 4 out there. While the Bulls' offense was different from present day, the entire league has changed a lot in the past 10 years. Most teams started 2 non-shooting big men back then, so what Thibodeau was doing was actually pretty normal. Interestingly enough, at the press conference, someone asked Thibs about having a modern-day offense. Thibs said that he agrees that the league has changed from 3-out lineups with 2 bigs to 4-out lineups with 1 big and even 5-out lineups in order to improve spacing. Thibodeau may have been out of a job for the past 2 seasons, but that doesn't mean he's not still studying the game. Thibodeau seems to be very aware that a modern-day offense ideally has at least 4 outside shooters. There's this idea that Thibodeau is an old-school guy who refuses to change, and I admit that I was guilty of this thinking, but after doing further investigation, I'm sure Thibs is more than willing to adapt. Thibs is one of the best basketball minds in the league. Why wouldn't he adjust? Furthermore, about 2 months ago, Thibodeau went on ESPN and talked about how the league is constantly changing.
Our league is always changing. It never stays the same, and it never has, nor will it ever. So you have to keep adapting as time goes on, but I think the same things do win.
To me, this sounds like Thibodeau will be a lot more willing to run 4-out lineups with a big man inside next year. This year, the Knicks played basketball like it was still 2010, pretty much always starting 2 non-shooting big men, usually Taj Gibson and Julius Randle, or Mitchell Robinson and Julius Randle. I think this is part of the reason the Knicks were so bad on offense. Having 2 non-shooters out there limits the amount of three-pointers your team will make, and threes are vital to having an elite offense. Furthermore, 2 non-shooters also kills the team's spacing and makes it difficult for players to drive to the basket. I think we can expect that next year under Thibodeau, Mitchell Robinson will start at the 5, and the Knicks will play a stretch 4 next to him. If Julius Randle is still on the team, he needs to come off the bench. Randall is a good player, but his play style is outdated. The 4 in today's league is a perimeter position. With a stretch 4 next to Mitchell Robinson, the floor will be so much better space for guys like RJ Barrett to get to the hoop. Of course, this isn't just on Thibodeau, this is also on the front office to acquire a stretch 4. In free agency, the Knicks should be looking at stretch 4s like Danilo Gallinari, Davis Bertans, and even Carmelo Anthony. Furthermore, I think we could expect that Thibodeau will have the Knicks shooting more threes. As I stated before, the Knicks need to fire more three-pointers. The Knicks ranked 29th in three-point attempts a game this year, and they not so coincidentally ranked 29th in offense. If the Knicks want to be a great offense, they need to shoot more threes. This is another area where I think Thibodeau will be flexible. Again, I think the idea that Thibs is unwilling to adapt is a myth. I believe that he will instruct the Knicks to shoot more three-pointers next season. Now in Minnesota, the Thibs-led Timberwolves were never one of the best three-point shooting teams, but Thibs did get them to up their attempts. According to TeamRankings.com, the Wolves were second to last in three-point shots a game at just 16 attempts a game the season before Thibs took over as head coach. Now, if you fast forward 3 seasons later, the Wolves attempted 28.7 three-pointers a game. This only ranked 26th in the league, but it's a significant uptick in attempts. The fact that the Wolves almost doubled their three-point attempts suggests that Thibs was trying to adjust to the modern NBA. The reason why they were never elite at shooting three-pointers can be figured out by analyzing the personnel. Just look at the Timberwolves starting lineup back in 2018. The only above-average three-point shooter in this lineup is Karl Anthony Towns. When you're a head coach, you play a team to its strengths. Guys like Andrew Wiggins and Jimmy Butler are not three-point snipers. They're both guys that are really good in the mid-range and getting to the rim and the free throw line. Thibs was just playing to the strengths of his team. So what does this mean for the Knicks going forward? This means that Thibodeau will encourage the Knicks to shoot the three. But again, Leon Rose needs to sign shooters. We can expect guys like Reggie Bullock and Damian Dotson to get more playing time, and we can expect that Thibodeau's lineups are going to have way more floor spacers. Knicks fans should also expect that Thibodeau will do a good job developing the Knicks' young players, particularly RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. These were the 2 young players that Thibs identified as building blocks in his press conference. I already explained in my last video that Thibs has a great track record in player development, and he's earned the ringing endorsement of many players. In fact, this is what Jimmy Butler said about Thibs. Jimmy on Thibs, he's going to do great. He's going to turn those young guys into some real players, some superstars, some all-stars. I know he's been itching for this. I know he's been preparing for it. When you talk about Thibs and the big stage, I think they go hand in hand. Not everyone is high on RJ, but I'm confident he will become an all-star, especially now that Thibodeau is here. The reason for this is because RJ is already really good at getting to the paint and getting to the free throw line. But if RJ wants to take his game to that next level, he needs to work hard on his outside shooting. Having an outside game will make his driving game a lot better. He struggled finishing this year, but if the Knicks add shooters, I know his percentages inside will go up because he won't be going into a wall of defenders. Let's not forget that RJ also has a pretty good all-around game. He rebounds the ball pretty well, he plays solid defense, and he's a capable passer. He isn't someone that just impacts the game one way. And for those that don't think Thibs will develop RJ into a star, let me state this. If Jimmy Butler, who has a similar physical profile to RJ at 6'7", became an all-star in 4 seasons under Thibs, why can't RJ? When Butler came into the league, he was pretty raw, but Thibs and the rest of the Bulls helped him become a great two-way player. RJ is similar to Butler in that he's an incredible hard worker and he has a killer instinct. It won't happen overnight, but Thibs will get RJ to that star level. I also want to talk about the impact that Thibodeau can have on Mitch Robinson. I'm sure Thibodeau is going to turn Mitch into a yearly Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Thibs worked with a similar player in Joakim Noah. Noah was absolute trash when he played for the Knicks, but don't forget just how truly dominant Noah was in his prime. He was a Defensive Player of the Year, and I believe he got robbed of the award a few times. He was not only a great rim protector, but he could switch on to perimeter players, and he was a vocal leader. He was the definition of a defensive anchor. Thibodeau was able to turn Noah from a raw talent to a dominant player. If Thibodeau was able to do that for Noah, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to help Mitchell Robinson take a massive leap. Mitch is already an elite shot blocker and switch defender. Once he gets his fouls under control, his potential will be truly unlocked. Expect Mitchell Robinson to blossom under Thibodeau. Thibodeau also got asked about Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina at the press conference. He said that he wants to practice with these guys before giving them a definitive analysis. While Frank and Knox have been disappointing, considering that they were both top 10 lottery picks, I believe they're both hard workers. Thibodeau and the Knicks coaching staff will work with them to help them become very good players. The Knicks front office also seems to be all in on player development. It's been reported that the Knicks are looking to add player development coaches to the staff, including Mike Miller and Mike Woodson. I think that Tom Thibodeau and the coaching staff will have a massive impact on the Knicks' young core. The last thing that Knicks fans should expect from Thibs is a top-notch defense. The Bulls were always great defensively under Thibs. The Wolves were pretty bad on defense, but I think that's more related to guys like Towns and Wiggins being horrible defenders. Thibodeau is a defensive mastermind because the schemes that he developed became the staple of defense in the NBA, particularly the way he defended pick and rolls, which is called ice defense. Ice is still effective, but it doesn't work on every possession in the NBA. Thibs will need to adjust his schemes on certain matchups, but I'm sure Thibs will adjust his defensive schemes to fit the modern NBA. I also think there's a good chance that the Knicks can thrive defensively next year. Guys like Mitchell Robinson, Frank Ntilikina, RJ Barrett, Damian Dotson, and Reggie Bullock are all good on the defensive end. The Knicks front office just needs to make sure that the players they add in the offseason are two-way players. And guys like Bobby Portis and Julius Randle, who are horrible on the defensive end, probably shouldn't return next year. Overall, I do expect the defense to pick up. So there you have it, Knicks fans. Those are some of the major changes that will happen under a Tom Thibodeau-led team. Do you like these changes? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and enjoy the rest of your day.